I found my wedding photograph face down in the mud, soaked through with rainwater, and something darker seeping into the paper. Howard's smile, steady, warm, the same one he gave me the day we promised forever, was blurred into a pale ghost. And standing above the trash bin, adjusting her silk scarf like nothing mattered, my daughter-in-law, Sabrina, glanced at me and said, "It's trash." Not quietly, not apologetically, just like that. Like 40 years of my life could be swept into a bag and tied shut. Hello, my dears. I'm Grace, and I'll tell you right now, when someone calls your memories trash, they're not cleaning your house. They're testing how far they can erase you. Would you let that slide? Tell me in the comments. And let's get into it. I didn't scream. That's the part most people get wrong when they hear this story. They imagine a scene, some dramatic collapse, tears in the driveway, accusations flying like broken glass. But at 70, you learn something about silence. It's not weakness. It's a weapon if you hold it long enough. I bent down slowly, my knees protesting like old hinges, and lifted the photograph from the wet cardboard. The paper had softened, edges curling inward, the ink bleeding just enough to make Howard's eyes look like they were fading away. I pressed it flat against my palm, ignoring the smear of coffee grounds and something citrusy. Orange peel, I think, stuck to the back. Those boxes were full of mold, Mabel, Sabrina continued, already turning away, her voice smooth, controlled, like she was explaining a design choice. Honestly, it's not healthy to keep that kind of clutter. It drags the whole space down. I looked up at the porch. Elliot was standing in the doorway, one hand still on the frame, like he hadn't decided whether to step outside or retreat. My son. 50 years old next spring. He had Howard's height, my eyes, and lately, something else I didn't recognize. "You could have asked," I said. My voice surprised even me. It came out steady, almost soft. Sabrina gave a short laugh, not cruel exactly, but dismissive. "Asked you what? Whether we could throw away boxes of decaying paper? Come on, Mabel. Nobody was using them." Nobody was using them. I let that sit there between us, heavier than any accusation. Then I looked back at Elliot. I didn't ask him to defend me. I just waited. He shifted his weight. "Mom, Sabrina's just trying to help. The house needs updating. You said yourself it's a lot to manage." There it was. Not a defense. Not even neutrality. Just a quiet agreement dressed up as concern. I nodded once, as if I understood something I hadn't before. Maybe I did. "Of course," I said. I gathered what I could from the box: photographs, envelopes, a ribbon that had once been blue but now looked the color of stormwater, and carried them inside. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the cinnamon tea I'd left steeping that morning. The same kitchen where I had baked Howard's favorite molasses bread, where Elliot had done his homework, where Clara, my Clara, had once stood on a chair and tried to reach the sugar jar before she was even tall enough to see over the counter. I laid the photographs out on the table, one by one. The paper stuck slightly to the wood before peeling free with a soft, wet sound. I found the picture of my mother, Adelaide Mercer, taken in 1949, her hat tilted just so, eyes bright, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. The corner was torn now. "Some of these are salvageable," Sabrina said from the doorway. She had followed me in, arms folded. "We can scan the good ones, digitize everything. That way you don't have to keep physical copies." I didn't look at her. These are the originals. That's exactly the problem, she replied. They're fragile, inefficient. I picked up another photograph. Elliot at 6 years old, missing his front tooth, holding a crooked fishing rod Howard had bought him at a roadside stand. I remembered that day down to the smell of the lake water and the way Elliot had insisted he'd caught a shark. Inefficient, I repeated quietly. Sabrina moved closer, her heels tapping against the tile. Mabel, you have to understand. This house has potential. Real potential. But not if it's weighed down with all this. She gestured vaguely at the table, at the past. Potential for what? I asked. For a future, she said simply. I turned then, finally meeting her eyes. They were sharp, calculating in a way she probably thought was confidence. And what part of that future includes me? She hesitated, just for a second. Then she smiled. Of course you're part of it. We just want you to be comfortable, less burdened. Behind her, Elliot rubbed the back of his neck, a habit he'd had since he was a teenager trying to talk his way out of something. Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you about, maybe, simplifying things. You know, making life easier. For everyone. Simplifying. I looked at the kitchen, at the worn oak table, at the cabinet where Howard kept his chipped blue mug, at the window that faced Cranberry Lane, where the maple tree still leaned just slightly to the left because Elliot had crashed his bike into it when he was 12. This house is already simple, I said. Sabrina's smile tightened. You're attached to it. I get that. But attachment can become limiting. I turned back to the photographs and gently separated two that had stuck together. One of them was Clara, 4 years old, holding a porcelain doll with one missing eye. That photo had been in a small envelope marked "Keep Safe." I had kept it safe, until I let someone else decide what safety meant. From the living room, I heard the low hum of Sabrina's phone. She stepped away to answer it, her voice dropping into that professional tone she used with clients. Yes, the Cranberry Lane property. No, it's larger than it looks from the outside. Yes, it has excellent bones. Excellent bones. I closed my eyes for a moment. Elliot lingered by the doorway. She didn't mean it like that, he said quietly. I didn't respond. She's just thinking ahead about what's best. For who? I asked without turning. He didn't answer. I opened the drawer by the stove and took out an old linen cloth, the kind my mother used for polishing silver. I began laying the photographs on it, carefully, spacing them so they wouldn't stick again. Behind me, I heard Elliot sigh. You're overreacting, Mom. That word again. Overreacting. As if grief had a proper volume and I had exceeded it. I picked up the wedding photograph once more. Howard's face was still there, faint but present. I ran my thumb lightly over the image, as if I could anchor it back into place. No, I said finally. I'm not. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, then steady against the roof. I could hear it through the old gutters. Howard never quite got around to replacing. In the other room, Sabrina laughed at something on the phone. Elliot walked away from the doorway, his footsteps fading down the hall, like he had already decided this conversation was over. But for me, it had just begun. Because that was the moment I understood something I should have seen much earlier. They weren't cleaning my house. They were preparing it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the photographs. I'd already laid them out across the kitchen like fragile survivors. but because of the silence in the house. It had changed. Houses breathe differently when the balance inside them shifts. Mine used to settle into the night with familiar creaks, like an old friend adjusting in a chair. That night, it felt occupied. Around 2 in the morning, I got up, wrapped my wool cardigan tighter around my shoulders, and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The floor was cold. The photographs were still there, drying under the soft yellow light. I picked one at random. Howard in the garden, holding a basket of early apples, the kind that are too sour for pie, but perfect for jelly if you know what you're doing. He was laughing at something I had said, though I couldn't remember what anymore. Funny, the things that stay and the things that go. I made myself a cup of chamomile with a slice of dried bergamot peel, an old habit I'd picked up from Adelaide, and sat at the table. For a long time, I just looked at the photographs, not crying, not yet. Just taking inventory. What was left, what wasn't, and what that meant. By morning, I had decided one thing. I would not confront them again. Not like that. Not in the kitchen, not with Sabrina leaning against the counter like she owned the place, and Elliot trying to smooth everything over with that tired, practiced tone. No. If they wanted to play at rearranging my life, I would stop asking them to stop. I would simply change the rules. The house woke up slowly. Pipes rattled. The old clock in the hallway chimed 7 with a faint metallic echo. I heard Sabrina first, her heels again, always those precise, deliberate steps. Then the sound of the espresso machine she had insisted on bringing into my kitchen, as if my old percolator wasn't civilized enough. I stayed where I was. A few minutes later, Elliot came in. He stopped when he saw the table. Jesus, Mom. You're still at this? At this, I repeated without looking up. He rubbed his face, tired already. You didn't have to take everything out of the trash like that. Sabrina was just trying to help. You could have gone through it with her first. With her, I said quietly. Yeah, he nodded, like that was obvious. She knows how to organize things. She does this for a living. I picked up Clara's photograph again. The water damage had spread overnight, softening the edges of her face until she looked like she was fading into fog. Does she also decide which parts of a person's life get to stay? I asked. Elliot exhaled sharply. Why are you making this philosophical? It's just stuff. Just stuff. I placed the photograph down very carefully. When you were 8, I said, you refused to throw away a broken red truck. Remember that? He frowned. What does that have to do with anything? You slept with it under your pillow for 3 nights, I continued. Said you didn't want it to feel lonely in the trash. He shifted uncomfortably. I was a kid. Yes, I said. You were. Sabrina entered then, dressed already, cream blouse, tailored trousers, hair pulled back like she was heading into a client meeting instead of my kitchen. She glanced at the table, then at me. We really need to clear this before the contractor comes, she said. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just logistics. Contractor? I asked. She blinked once, as if surprised I didn't know. Yes, I told you yesterday. We're having someone come look at the living room, the load-bearing wall. It might be possible to open it up, create a more fluid space. I turned to Elliot. You're bringing contractors into my house now? He hesitated, just long enough. We were going to talk to you about it, he said. It's not a big deal, Mom. Just an assessment. An assessment, I repeated. Sabrina stepped closer to the table, picking up one of the photographs between two fingers, careful not to touch too much of it. "Look, Mabel," she said, her voice shifting into that tone. Calm, explanatory, slightly superior. "This isn't about disrespecting your memories. It's about functionality. The house has incredible potential, but right now it's compartmentalized, closed off. We're just trying to help it evolve." I watched her hold that photograph like it was a sample of outdated fabric. "Put that down," I said. She did. Slowly. But there was a flicker in her eyes now. Not apology. Calculation. "You have to trust us a little," she added. "We're thinking long term." There it was again. Long term. "For how long?" I asked. Neither of them answered. The doorbell rang. Sabrina glanced at her watch. "That'll be him." "Him?" I asked. "The contractor," she said, already moving toward the door. I stood up. "Don't open that door," I said. She paused, looked back at me, then at Elliot. Elliot sighed. "Mom, please don't do this." "Don't do what?" I asked. "Protect my own house?" "It's not like that," he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. The doorbell rang again. Louder this time. Insistent. Sabrina turned the handle. I moved faster than she expected. At 70, people assume you move slowly. They forget that speed isn't always in the legs. Sometimes it's in the decision. I stepped between her and the door, placing my hand flat against it before she could pull it open. "No," I said. She stared at me, stunned for a moment. Then her expression hardened. "Mabel, you're being unreasonable." "And you're being presumptuous," I replied. Elliot stepped forward. "Mom, it's just a consultation." "It's my house," I said, louder now, not shouting, but firm enough that the words settled into the walls. Silence. Even the man outside seemed to pause. I took a breath, steadying myself. "You don't bring strangers in to discuss tearing down walls without asking the person who built her life inside them?" I continued. Sabrina crossed her arms. "No one is tearing anything down. You're exaggerating again." "Am I?" I asked. "Because yesterday, my memories were trash. Today, my walls are obstacles. I'm curious what I'll be by next week." That landed. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the doorbell rang a third time. I turned the handle myself and opened the door just enough to see the man standing there. Clipboard, polite smile, boots already tracking in a bit of mud from the walkway. "Good morning," he began. "I'm here to—" "You're not," I said gently but firmly. "There's been a misunderstanding. This visit wasn't approved." He blinked, confused, then glanced past me at Sabrina. "I was told—" "I understand," I said. "But whoever told you didn't have the authority." There was an awkward pause. Then he nodded, professional enough not to argue. "All right, I'll reschedule when everything's sorted." "Thank you," I said, and closed the door. When I turned back, Sabrina was staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as an old woman, as an obstacle. Elliot looked caught in between, his mouth slightly open. Like he wanted to say something, but couldn't decide which side it belonged to. I walked past them, back to the kitchen, and picked up the damp photograph of Howard again. "Breakfast is on the stove," I said calmly. "If you're still hungry." And that was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Because for the first time since they moved in, I hadn't asked for permission to exist in my own home. And they had noticed. By midday, the house looked exactly the same to anyone passing by on Cranberry Lane. Curtains drawn halfway, the old maple casting its uneven shadow across the porch, the chipped white railing Howard always said he'd repaint next spring. Nothing about it suggested that something had already begun to fracture inside. But I could feel it. Not in the walls. In the rhythm. Sabrina stopped asking where things were. That was the first sign. Instead of, "Mabel, where do you keep the serving platters?" It became drawers opening without hesitation, cabinets shifting out of their usual order. She had mapped the house faster than I expected. Or maybe she had been mapping it all along. I stood at the sink, rinsing a teacup when I noticed it. My spice rack. Not the modern glass jars Sabrina had brought, but the old wooden carousel Howard built for me in 1986. Each label written in my own hand. Marjoram, smoked paprika, fennel seed. It was gone. Not moved. Gone. I dried my hands slowly and walked to the pantry. There it was, pushed to the back, half hidden behind a stack of identical clear containers. The labels were still there, but Sabrina had turned them inward, like something slightly embarrassing she didn't want guests to see. I rotated it back into place. A small thing. But small things accumulate. In the living room, I found Elliot on his phone, pacing near the window. He lowered his voice when he saw me, turning slightly away. "No, we just need a little more time. I know, but the paperwork isn't finalized yet." "Yes, I said I'd handle it." "Paperwork." He ended the call quickly. "Hey, Mom." "Who was that?" I asked. "Just work," he said too fast. "Inspection backlog." I nodded, as if I believed him. From the hallway, I heard Sabrina speaking, her tone clipped but controlled. "No, not yet. She's resistant. Yes, but it's just emotional attachment, nothing legal. I'll manage it." I didn't move, didn't interrupt, just listened. That was when I understood something important. They weren't improvising. They had a plan. And then I went back to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of tea, this time stronger. Assam, not chamomile. I needed clarity, not comfort. The steam rose slowly, curling into the air like a quiet warning. On the table, the photographs had begun to dry unevenly. Some curled at the edges, others flattened into brittle shapes that would crack if handled too roughly. I picked up one I hadn't looked at yet. It was from 1978. Howard, standing beside the old Whitrow mill by the creek. The mill had been abandoned even then, but he loved that place. Said it had good bones, long before Sabrina ever used the phrase. In the background, barely visible, was a stone marker near the edge of the property line. I frowned. I didn't remember that stone being there. I leaned closer, angling the photograph toward the light. There was someone else in the frame, half cut off, just a shoulder and part of a coat. Not family. Not anyone I recognized. Strange what you miss when you're busy living. "Are you planning to keep all of these out like this?" Sabrina's voice cut in from behind me. I didn't turn. "For now." "It's not exactly presentable," she said. "If we have people coming through—" "No one is coming through," I said calmly. There was a pause. Then, "We need to talk about that." I finally looked at her. "Do we?" She stepped into the kitchen, arms crossed again. That posture she used when she wanted to establish control without raising her voice. Yes, because this situation, she gestured vaguely toward the table, the house, me, isn't sustainable. Sustainable for who? I asked. For everyone, she replied. You, especially. You shouldn't be managing a property like this alone. It's too much. I've managed it for 40 years. And you've done a great job, she said quickly, almost rehearsed. But things change. People need support, structure. Structure. I thought of the trust forms Calvin had mentioned years ago, of the time Elliot had gently suggested simplifying the estate, of how easily I had signed that limited power of attorney after my knee surgery, trusting that it was just for convenience. Is that what this is about? I asked quietly. Structure? Sabrina's eyes flickered, just for a second. You're reading too much into things, she said. Am I? I asked. From the living room, Elliot called out, What's going on? Nothing, Sabrina answered quickly, without taking her eyes off me. Just talking. We held each other's gaze for a moment longer. Then she smiled. Not warmly, just strategically. We'll figure it out, she said, and turned away. I watched her leave the kitchen, her steps measured, confident. Then I looked back at the photograph in my hand, at the mill, at the stone marker, at the figure half hidden at the edge of the frame. And for the first time since I pulled those boxes out of the trash, I felt something shift again. Not grief, not anger, something sharper. Because whatever they thought they were rearranging in my house, they hadn't realized yet how much of it I hadn't even finished uncovering. By late afternoon, the house had gone quiet again. Not peaceful, just quiet in that careful, controlled way people get when they're no longer sure what they can say out loud. Elliot had shut himself in the living room with his laptop, tapping keys like each one might fix something that was already slipping. Sabrina had taken a call upstairs, her voice low, measured, but sharper than usual. I stayed in the kitchen. The photographs had dried enough to move. I began stacking them in small groups, separating what could be saved from what would always carry the mark of that morning. It wasn't just damage. It was interruption. Like someone had walked into a sentence and erased half the words. Clara's photo, I set aside. That one would need more time. The front door opened and closed softly. For a moment, I thought Sabrina had left, but then I heard lighter steps, quicker, uneven. Grandma? Nora. She appeared in the doorway, her backpack still slung over one shoulder, hair slightly damp from the mist outside. She looked from me to the table, then back again. I saw the boxes, she said quietly. I nodded. So did I. She stepped closer, setting her bag down by the chair. Mom said it was just old junk, that it smelled. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up a photograph and handed it to her. Do you know who that is? She took it carefully. That's Grandpa Howard, right? And you? Yes. You look different, she said, studying it. Happier, I think. I smiled faintly. We were standing in front of the mill that day. Your grandfather had this idea he was going to fix it up, turn it into something useful again. Did he? No, I said. Life got in the way. Nora hesitated, then glanced toward the hallway. They didn't think you'd notice. That made me look at her. What do you mean? She bit her lip, clearly weighing something. Mom's been talking about it for a while. Not the photos exactly, but The house. She says it's wasted, that it could be something bigger, like a project. A project. I leaned back in my chair. And your father. Nora gave a small shrug. He says it's complicated, but he doesn't argue with her. Not really. No, I thought. He doesn't. She said once, Nora continued more carefully, that once everything is cleared out, it'll be easier to move forward. That you'd probably agree if things were simpler. Simpler. There it was again. And what do you think? I asked. Nora looked down at the photograph in her hands. I think. She hesitated, then met my eyes. I think she doesn't understand what any of this means. I nodded slowly. No, she doesn't. We sat in silence for a moment. The kind that isn't empty, just full of things not said yet. Grandma, Nora said finally, lowering her voice. There's something else. I felt it before she even spoke, that slight tightening in the air, like before a storm. What is it? I heard them last week, she said. Late at night. They thought I was asleep. She glanced toward the ceiling, as if the words might still be up there. Mom was talking about getting the paperwork started, about making things official before you had time to change your mind. My hands stilled on the table. What paperwork? I don't know exactly, Nora said quickly. Something about access and rights. She said if it was set up the right way, you wouldn't have to worry about the house anymore. I let out a slow breath. Not improvising. Planning. How long have they been talking about this? I asked. A few weeks, she admitted. Maybe longer. I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just her being her. Her being her. I looked at the photographs again, at the careful way they were now laid out, drying, recovering. And then I saw it. A gap. There had been another stack, smaller, tied with a narrow blue ribbon. I had placed it to the side earlier, away from the worst of the damage. It wasn't there now. I stood up. Did you move anything from this table? I asked. Nora shook her head immediately. No, I just got home. I walked around the table, scanning every surface. The counter, the chair, the small sideboard near the window. Nothing. A quiet, precise absence. I turned toward the hallway. Sabrina's voice drifted down the stairs, faint but audible. No, not yet. I told you. She's still holding on to certain things. Yes, I have them. Have them. My chest tightened, but not with panic. With certainty. I looked back at Nora. Stay here, I said. Grandma. Stay, I repeated, softer now. Just for a moment. She nodded. I walked toward the stairs, each step deliberate, measured. Not rushing. Not hesitating. Halfway up, Sabrina's voice became clearer. It's just a matter of timing. Once the transition starts, it'll all fall into place. Transition. I reached the top of the stairs and saw her in the guest room, back turned to me, phone pressed to her ear. On the bed beside her lay a familiar strip of faded blue ribbon. My ribbon. The one I had tied around the photographs I never showed anyone, not even Elliot. I stepped into the doorway. Sabrina, I said. She turned. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt. Recognition. Like she understood all at once that this was no longer about cleaning or organizing or even control. It was about being caught. "I'm going to need you to hang up that call," I said quietly. She didn't move. Neither did I. And in that stillness, the balance in the house shifted again. This time, not in their favor. I want you to picture this clearly. A quiet hallway, a ribbon on the bed, a woman realizing something wasn't just thrown away, it was taken. So tell me, what would you do in Mabel's place right now? Me? I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd make sure that from this moment on, nothing of mine could be touched without consequences. Sabrina didn't hang up immediately. She held my gaze for half a second longer than necessary, then turned slightly away and said into the phone, "I'll call you back." Her voice was controlled, but there was a tightness in it now, like something had slipped out of place. She ended the call and set the phone down on the nightstand. "What is it, Mabel?" she asked, as if this were just another conversation about curtains or cabinet handles. I stepped into the room and closed the door behind me. Not loudly, just enough. "The ribbon," I said, nodding toward the bed. "And everything tied to it." She glanced at it, then back at me. "Oh, that. I was going to bring it downstairs. I didn't think it belonged out with the rest of the damaged items." Damaged. I walked past her and picked up the ribbon. It was still slightly damp, but intact, unlike some of the photographs it had been holding together. "You didn't think it belonged," I repeated. "It's just that you seemed overwhelmed," she continued smoothly. "I thought I'd help by separating what might need special attention." I turned to her, the ribbon resting in my palm. "Open the drawer," I said. She didn't move. "Sabrina," I said again, still calm, "open the drawer." There was a flicker of irritation now, but she stepped aside and pulled open the dresser drawer beside the bed. Inside were the photographs. Not all of them, just those. The ones I never left out. The ones I kept tied, hidden, contained. Howard's hospital bracelet. Clara's last birthday. A letter in my mother's handwriting that I hadn't read in years because I knew exactly what it said without opening it. "You were sorting them," I said. "I was protecting them," she corrected. "From what?" "From further damage," she replied, lifting her chin slightly. "And from being mishandled." I let that sit for a moment. "Mishandled," I said quietly. "By me." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I closed the drawer myself. "That drawer," I said, "is not part of your system." Her expression hardened. "You're being territorial over objects that are not yours," I finished. Silence. For a moment, the house felt very small. "I think," Sabrina said slowly, choosing her words now, "that you're reacting emotionally to something that could be handled much more rationally." "And I think," I replied, "that you've mistaken access for permission." That landed. She crossed her arms again, but this time it wasn't control. It was defense. "We're trying to build something here," she said. "Something sustainable. You can't expect things to stay frozen forever." "I never asked for forever," I said. "Just respect." From the hallway, I heard Elliot's voice. "Sabrina?" He was closer now. I stepped back from the dresser. "This conversation isn't over," I said. She gave a tight smile. "No, it isn't." I walked out before Elliot reached the top of the stairs. Nora was still in the kitchen, exactly where I had left her, sitting at the table with one of the photographs in her hands. She looked up when I entered. "Well?" she asked quietly. I sat down across from her and placed the blue ribbon on the table between us. "They weren't thrown away by accident," I said. She nodded once, like she already knew. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at the photographs spread across the table, at the ones that had survived, at the ones that hadn't. Then I looked toward the hallway, where I could hear Sabrina and Elliot speaking in low, urgent voices now. No longer calm, no longer certain. For the first time, they were adjusting. Good. "I'm going to finish drying these," I said. Nora frowned slightly. "That's it?" "For now," I said. "Because here's the thing people misunderstand about moments like this. They think the turning point is loud. It isn't. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself." I picked up Clara's photograph again and gently pressed it flat against the cloth. "They think this is about cleaning," I continued, almost to myself. "About space. About convenience." Nora leaned forward. "It's not, is it?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "It's about control." From the hallway, Elliot's voice rose slightly, just enough to catch a word. "Too fast," Sabrina replied, sharper now. "Because she won't—" I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. I smoothed the edge of the photograph one last time, then set it carefully aside. And that was the moment I made the decision. Not to argue, not to convince, but to make sure that whatever they thought they were building here would never belong to them. I didn't act that evening. That would have been the mistake they expected. Something emotional, immediate, easy to dismiss later as overreaction. Instead, I made dinner. Quietly. The way I always had. Lentil stew with a pinch of smoked cumin and a bay leaf. Howard used to insist made all the difference. I even set the table for 3. Sabrina came down first. She paused when she saw the table, as if the normalcy of it unsettled her more than an argument would have. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," I replied, "but I did." Elliot joined a minute later. He looked between us, searching for tension, like a man stepping into a room he knew might already be on fire. We ate in silence. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that belongs to people who understand each other without words. This was a measured silence. Careful. Observing. Halfway through the meal, Sabrina set her spoon down. "We should talk about earlier," she said. "No," I answered calmly. "We shouldn't. Not tonight." She didn't like that. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. Elliot cleared his throat. "Mom, she's right. We can't just ignore this." "I'm not ignoring it," I said. "I'm deciding when it matters." That ended the conversation. After dinner, I washed the dishes myself. Sabrina offered once, briefly, but it sounded more like obligation than intent. I declined. I needed the quiet, the rhythm, the sound of water running over porcelain. Because while they thought the day had ended, mine hadn't even properly begun. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Not out of habit, out of clarity. The house was still. Even the pipes hadn't started their usual complaints yet. I dressed slowly, choosing the gray wool coat I hadn't worn since last winter, and the small brooch Adelaide had given me. A simple silver leaf. Nothing dramatic. Just deliberate. I took the blue ribbon from the kitchen table and slipped it into my coat pocket. Then I left. Briar Glen at that hour is a different place. The streets still half asleep, storefronts dark, the bakery on Maple already awake. Warm light spilling out, the smell of fresh rye and honey buns drifting into the cold air. I didn't stop. Not today. My first stop was North Hollow Credit Union, the same place where Elliot had opened his first account, where Howard used to joke that the tellers knew more about our lives than our neighbors. Inside, it was quiet. Just one clerk behind the counter, a young woman with dark hair pulled into a neat bun, and a name tag that read, Priya Sen. "Good morning," she said with a polite smile. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to review my accounts," I said, "and make some changes." She nodded and guided me to a small desk by the window. Sunlight had just begun to reach the glass, catching the edge of the paperwork as she laid it out. "Of course. What kind of changes are you looking to make?" I folded my hands in front of me. All of them. That got her attention. We went through everything. Access permissions, emergency contacts, automatic transfers. The small, quiet ways I had made Elliot's life easier over the years. Ways I hadn't even noticed piling up. "Your son is listed here," Priya said gently, turning the screen slightly toward me, "for account assistance and authorization in certain cases." "I'd like that removed," I said. She hesitated, just briefly. "May I ask if everything is all right?" I met her eyes. "It will be," I said. One by one, we untangled it. Permissions revoked, notifications redirected. Secondary access cleared. Each click of her keyboard felt like a thread being pulled free. Not cutting him off. Just returning things to their proper place. When we finished, Priya printed out the updated documents and slid them toward me. "Everything is now under your sole authorization," she said. "No one else can make changes or access information without your direct consent." I signed where needed. Carefully, no hesitation. As I stood to leave, Priya added, "If you need anything else, legal referrals, financial planning, we can help with that too." I gave her a small smile. "I may take you up on that." Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. I reached into my pocket and touched the blue ribbon. Still there, still mine. My next stop wasn't planned. At least, not consciously. But my feet carried me there anyway. Down the quieter end of town, past the post office, past the old hardware store, to a narrow building with a faded sign, Briar Glen Records and Archives. I hadn't been inside in years. The door creaked as I pushed it open. The smell hit me immediately. Paper, dust, and something faintly smoky, like old tea leaves. Behind a tall desk stacked with folders sat a man I recognized, though time had reshaped him. "Orson?" I said. He looked up, peering over his glasses. Then his face broke into slow recognition. "Mabel Whitrow," he said. "Well, I'll be." Orson Tallow, former history teacher, keeper of things people forgot they needed to remember. "What brings you here?" he asked, standing up slowly. I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph. "The past," I said, "and a question." He took the photo carefully, holding it under the desk lamp. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied it. "The mill," he murmured. "Haven't seen this angle before." "There's something else," I said, pointing. "There, by the marker." He adjusted his glasses, leaning closer. For a moment, he said nothing. Then his expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. "Well now," he said quietly. "That's interesting." I didn't ask him to explain. Not yet. Because I had learned something in the last 24 hours. Information isn't something you rush. It's something you place. Carefully, exactly where it will matter most. And for the first time since Sabrina called my life trash, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Orson didn't speak right away. He held the photograph under the yellow desk lamp, tilting it slightly, then again, like he was trying to catch something hiding between the grains of time. I stood there, coat still on, hands folded, not rushing him. That was something Howard used to say. If you want the truth, don't crowd it. "Well now," Orson murmured again, softer this time. "What is it?" I asked. He tapped the corner of the photograph with a bent finger. "You see this stone marker here?" "I do." "That shouldn't be there," he said. I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear, recognition. "Why not?" "Because that boundary line was moved in '82, he replied. "County rezoning, small thing on paper, big thing for land ownership. The original marker was removed, at least officially." "Officially," I repeated. He gave a thin smile. "Officially." I stepped closer. "But in this photo, it's still there." "Yes," he said. "And more importantly, look who's standing next to it." He adjusted the lamp, bringing the background figure into sharper relief. A man in a dark coat, half turned, one hand resting near the stone. I squinted. "I don't recognize him." "Oh, you should," Orson said. "That's Walter Cresswell." The name landed heavier than I expected. Cresswell, as in Vale and Cresswell Living, he finished for me. Or rather, the Cresswell half of it. His father started the whole thing. Quiet acquisitions, old properties, boundary adjustments no one looked too closely at. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Because suddenly, Sabrina's voice from the hallway echoed back to me. "The Cranberry Lane property will be available." "You see the problem now," Orson continued, laying the photograph flat. "If that marker was still there when this was taken, and if that's Cresswell acknowledging it." He tapped the image again. "Then the original boundary might never have been properly enforced." "Meaning the land might still be yours," I said. Orson looked at me over his glasses. "Or at the very least, contested." Silence filled the room, thick and slow. I thought about the creek behind the mill, about the strip of land Sabrina had once called wasted space, about the casual way she had mentioned expanding sightlines, outdoor restructuring, maximizing value. Value? "You said this photo isn't common," I said. "I've never seen this version," Orson replied. "If you have the original, I do. Then you have something worth protecting." I nodded slowly. "Not just memory. Leverage." Orson straightened up, handing the photograph back to me with more care than before. "If you want, I can pull the old county maps. Compare them. See what's documented and what isn't." "I would appreciate that," I said. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think you came here just for nostalgia." "No," I said. "Not today." When I stepped back outside, the town had fully woken up. Cars passing, people moving, life continuing like nothing had shifted. But something had. I could feel it. Not just in the information Orson had given me. In myself. I walked back toward Cranberry Lane slowly, stopping once at the edge of the small park where Howard used to sit on Sundays, reading the paper and pretending not to feed the birds. I sat on the bench, took out the photograph again, looked at the marker, at the man beside it, at the version of my life that someone had almost thrown away without realizing what it held. And then I thought about Sabrina, about the ribbon, about the drawer, about the way she had said, once the transition starts. No, this wasn't just about the house. It never had been. By the time I reached home, the front door was unlocked. That was new. Inside, the house was too quiet. Not the careful silence from before. Something else. I stepped into the hallway and immediately noticed the difference. The living room. I turned. The shelves were half empty. Not cleaned, stripped. Frames removed. Books stacked in uneven piles on the floor. The old porcelain figurines from Adelaide's cabinet. Gone. My chest tightened, but I didn't rush. I walked in slowly, taking it in piece by piece. Elliot stood by the window, phone in hand, tension written across his face. Sabrina was near the center of the room, directing two men I had never seen before. Just these pieces, she was saying. The rest can go into storage. Storage. One of the men was already lifting a chair. My chair. The one Howard had repaired 3 times because I refused to throw it out. Put that down, I said. Everything stopped. Sabrina turned first. Oh, Mabel, you're back earlier than... I said put it down. The man hesitated, looking between us. Go ahead, Sabrina said, sharper now. It's fine. No, I said, stepping forward. It isn't. Elliot finally moved. Mom, listen. No, I said again. Now you listen. The room went still. Even the men stood frozen, unsure who they were working for anymore. You brought people into my house, I continued, my voice calm but cutting clean through the space. After I told you not to. You touched things that don't belong to you. You moved what you didn't understand. Sabrina crossed her arms, but there was tension in it now, not confidence. We're trying to make this livable, she said. It already is, I replied. You just don't recognize a life unless it fits your design. That's not fair. What's not fair, I interrupted, is treating me like I've already left. That hit Elliot harder than her. I saw it. Good. I stepped closer to the man holding the chair. You can put that down now, I said, softer. He did. Immediately. I turned back to Sabrina. This ends today. Her jaw tightened. You don't get to just... I do, I said. Because this is my house. Silence. Heavy. Final. And for the first time since this began, they weren't ahead of me anymore. The men didn't argue. That's the thing about hired help. They don't stay where the authority becomes unclear. One of them glanced at Elliot, the other at Sabrina, and when neither of them spoke with certainty, they stepped back. Maybe we should come back another time, one of them muttered. Yes, I said before anyone else could answer. You should. They didn't wait for permission after that. Within seconds, they were gone. The front door closed behind them with a quiet click that sounded far louder than it should have. Now it was just the three of us. Sabrina moved first. Not toward me, toward control. "You can't just shut everything down like this," she said. "We've already scheduled." "No," I cut in. "You scheduled." Elliot ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the room. "Mom, this is getting out of hand." I turned to him. "Is it?" "Yes," he said, more forcefully now. "You're overreacting again. We're trying to improve things and you keep turning it into something personal." I held his gaze. "It is personal," I said. "You just forgot that." That landed harder than anything else so far. I saw it in the way his shoulders dropped slightly, like something inside him recognized the truth but didn't want to hold on to it. Sabrina stepped in before that silence could grow. "This isn't working," she said. "We need structure, boundaries, a plan." "I agree," I said. That threw her. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, carefully, "Good. Then let's actually talk about what needs to happen." "We will," I said, "but not your way." I walked past them into the hallway and reached for the small panel by the wall, the security system Sabrina had insisted on installing 2 months ago. "For convenience," she had said, "for peace of mind." I entered the code. Then I changed it. The soft beep echoed through the house like a quiet line being drawn. Sabrina stared at me. "What are you doing?" "Resetting access," I said. "You can't just—" "I can," I replied calmly, "and I am." Elliot stepped forward. "Mom, that's unnecessary." "No," I said. "It's overdue." I moved to the front door next, unlocking it, then locking it again. Testing the mechanism, feeling the weight of it in my hand. "This house has doors for a reason," I continued, "not just to let people in." Sabrina's voice sharpened. "Are you seriously trying to lock us out of a place we've been living in?" "Temporarily staying in," I corrected. Elliot let out a frustrated breath. "This is insane." "No," I said quietly. "This is clarity." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was shifting. I walked back into the living room and looked at what they had already done. Half-moved furniture, empty spaces where things had been, the beginning of something that wasn't mine. Not anymore. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. Neither of them interrupted. "You will pack your things," I continued. "Everything that belongs to you, clothes, equipment, whatever you brought into this house." Sabrina laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You're serious?" "I am." "And where exactly are we supposed to go?" Elliot asked, his voice lower now, but tighter. I looked at him. "You'll figure it out," I said. "You're both very good at planning." That stung. Good. Sabrina stepped closer, her tone dropping into something colder. "You think this solves anything? You think pushing us out is going to fix whatever you're feeling right now?" "This isn't about what I'm feeling," I said. "It's about what you've been doing." She held my gaze, searching for hesitation. She didn't find it. "And the garage?" she asked suddenly. "There are things in there that belong to me. Expensive things." "I'm aware," I said. "You'll be able to collect them." "When?" "When I'm present," I answered, "and when it's arranged in advance." Her jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. No, I said. That's controlled. Elliot looked between us, the weight of it finally settling on him. You're really doing this, he said. I nodded once. Yes. There was a long pause. Then something changed in his expression. Not anger, not yet. Realization. Because for the first time, he understood something he hadn't before. I wasn't going to bend. And that was the moment the balance tipped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. They didn't leave that night. Of course they didn't. People like Sabrina don't retreat when they're told to. They pause, reassess, and look for another angle. Elliot followed her lead, as he always did. By evening, the house had that same strained quiet again, but now it was different. It wasn't control anymore. It was resistance. I stayed in the kitchen, going through the last of the photographs, placing them carefully into clean envelopes I found in the old writing desk. My hands moved steadily, methodically. No rush. No hesitation. From the hallway, I could hear their voices. Low, tight. She can't just do this. We need to think. Legal side. That word again. Legal. Good. Let them think about it. I sealed another envelope and wrote a small note on it. Clara, keep safe. The ink spread slightly on the paper, like it always did with this pen. I had used it for years. It still worked. Eventually, Elliot came into the kitchen. He didn't sit down this time. Just stood there, arms hanging at his sides like he wasn't sure what position to take. Mom, he said. I didn't look up right away. Finished what I was doing. Let him wait. Yes? We need to talk about this properly. We already are, I said. No, he shook his head. Not like this. Not with ultimatums. I set the pen down. Then how? I asked. Explain it to me. He hesitated. That told me everything. Sabrina stepped in a moment later, as expected. We need clarity, she said, about ownership, about future plans, about what happens to this property long term. There it is, I said quietly. What does that mean? Elliot asked. It means, I turned to him, this was never about cleaning or helping or even living here temporarily. Sabrina didn't deny it this time. That's not entirely fair, she said. But yes, we've been thinking ahead. Someone has to. Someone has to, I repeated. Elliot stepped forward. Mom, listen. This house is too much for one person. You know that. Maintenance, taxes, everything. We're just trying to make sure it doesn't become a burden. A burden, I said. There it was again. Same word, different voice. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Tell me something, Elliot, I said. When did I become something that needed managing? He flinched. Actually flinched. Good. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. No, I asked. Because it sounds very much like what you meant. Sabrina cut in, sharper now. We're trying to protect the value of the property. That's all. Whose value? I asked. Silence. There it was. I stood up, slowly. You've been making plans, I continued. Talking about paperwork. Access. Transitions. Elliot's eyes flicked toward Sabrina. That was enough. Without me, I added. We were going to include you, Sabrina said. But it sounded thinner now, less certain. When? I asked. After the walls were gone? After the house was simplified? After I agreed to something I hadn't even been told about? No answer. Of course. I walked past them, into the hallway, then turned back. You said this house has potential, I said to Sabrina. It does, she replied carefully. I agree, I said. That surprised both of them. But not for what you think. Elliot frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, you've been looking at this place like it's empty space waiting to be filled. And it's not? Sabrina challenged. I met her eyes. No, I said. It's already full. That hung there. Heavy. Uncomfortable. True. From the kitchen, the faint smell of bergamot still lingered. From the living room, the half-moved furniture stood like evidence of something interrupted. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. They had never understood what they were dealing with. Not the house, not the history, not me. Elliot exhaled slowly. So what now? I didn't answer immediately, because this was the part that mattered, not the argument. The next move. I looked at both of them. Really looked. At the calculation in Sabrina's eyes, at the uncertainty in Elliot's. Then I spoke. Now, I said, we do this properly. They waited. Good. Tomorrow, I continued, you'll both have time to gather what's yours, clothes, personal items. And after that? Sabrina asked. I held her gaze. After that, I said calmly, we involve people who deal with facts, not assumptions. Elliot's expression tightened. Lawyers? If necessary, I said. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't just tension, it was pressure. Building. Because now, for the first time, they realized this wasn't something they could talk their way out of. And I wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I didn't wait for them to wake up. I was already in the kitchen by the time Sabrina came down, dressed again like she had somewhere important to be. Maybe she did. People like her always have somewhere to go when things stop going their way. She stopped when she saw me at the table. Not with photographs this time, with papers. Neatly arranged, aligned, weighted down with the small brass letter opener Howard used to keep in his study. You're up early, she said carefully. I've been up, I replied. She walked closer, slower now, her eyes scanning the table. Not casually, evaluating. What is all this? She asked. Clarity, I said. That word again. This time she didn't like it. Elliot entered a moment later, still half asleep. But the second he saw the table, that changed. What's going on? He asked. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. He didn't argue. That told me more than anything he could have said. Sabrina remained standing. Also telling. I slid the first document forward. My accounts, I said. Updated yesterday. Elliot frowned. Updated how? You no longer have access, I replied. Silence. Then, what? He said, sharper now. No authorization, no emergency access, no transfers. Nothing tied to you. That's... He stopped himself, then tried again, calmer. Mom? That's extreme. No, I said. That's accurate. Sabrina stepped in. You didn't even discuss this with us. I didn't need to, I said. Her jaw tightened. I slid the next paper forward. The limited power of attorney you had, I said to Elliot. Revoked. This time, he didn't even try to hide it. You revoked it? He said. Yes. Why? I looked at him. Really looked. Because you were using access like it was ownership. That hit. He leaned back slightly, like he needed space from the words. Sabrina crossed her arms again. You're escalating this unnecessarily. No, I said calmly. I'm correcting it. Another paper. This is a notice, I continued, that any attempt to request copies of property documents, financial statements, or related records in my name will now require direct verification from me. Elliot stared at it, then at me. Who told you about that? He asked. There it was, not denial, concern. Does it matter? I asked. He didn't answer. Sabrina did. This is getting paranoid, she said. We haven't done anything illegal. Not yet, I said. That shut her up. For a moment, I folded my hands. You've been making plans, I continued. About this house? About transition? About access? Elliot rubbed his face. Mom? No, I said. You've both had time to talk. Now it's my turn. Silence. Good. I reached for the final document. Didn't slide it forward yet. Just rested my hand on it. This house, I said, is not an opportunity. Sabrina let out a short breath. No one said it was. You didn't have to, I replied. Elliot looked between us. What is that? He asked, nodding toward the paper under my hand. I met his eyes. This, I said, is what happens next. I slid it across the table. He picked it up. His expression changed as he read. Slowly, carefully. Sabrina leaned over his shoulder. What is it? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, it's a formal notice. Of what? She pressed. He swallowed. Of restricted access to the property. Silence. Heavy, sharp. Sabrina straightened. You can't be serious. I am, I said. This is your son, she snapped. You're treating him like a stranger. I shook my head. No, I said. I'm treating him like someone who forgot where he is. Elliot finally looked up. This means we have to leave, he said. Yes. When? Today, I replied. Sabrina laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's not how this works. It is now, I said. She stepped closer to the table. You don't get to just push us out overnight. You pushed first, I said. You just did it quietly. That landed harder than anything else. Elliot looked down at the paper again, then back at me. Mom? He started. Softer now. This is going too far. I leaned back slightly. No, I said. This is exactly far enough. Silence stretched between us, not uncertain anymore. Final. And for the first time since this began, they weren't trying to convince me. They were trying to understand how much control they had already lost. And the answer was simple. All of it. They didn't argue right away. That was new. Elliot kept staring at the paper like if he read it enough times, it would change. Sabrina, on the other hand, went very still. And I've learned something about people like her. When they go quiet, they're not accepting anything. They're calculating. You've made a mistake, she said finally. Calm, controlled, dangerous. No, I replied. I corrected one. She tilted her head slightly. You think a piece of paper changes reality? I met her eyes. It already has. Elliot exhaled slowly. Mom, where are we supposed to go on such short notice? I didn't soften. You've had weeks to plan, I said. You just didn't think you'd need a backup. That stung. He looked down again, jaw tightening. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. What you were doing wasn't fair. Sabrina stepped closer. We were trying to secure stability. For the future. For the family. For which family? I asked. Silence. Again. I stood up, not abruptly, just enough to shift the balance back where it belonged. You have until this evening, I said. Take what's yours. Leave what isn't. Sabrina's expression sharpened. And if we don't? I didn't raise my voice. I've already started involving people who deal with facts, I said. We can continue that way. That was the first moment she hesitated. Not emotionally, strategically. Elliot noticed it too. Sabrina, he said under his breath. But she wasn't done. You're going to regret this, she said. You're isolating yourself over objects, over old paper. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the blue ribbon on the table between us. This, I said, is not paper. She looked at it, didn't touch it. Then what is it? She asked. I held her gaze. Proof, I said. That word landed differently, because now, for the first time, she didn't know what I meant. Good. Elliot stood up slowly. What kind of proof? I didn't answer directly. Enough, I said. For what? He pressed. For me to stop being the easiest part of your plan, I replied. Silence, heavy, final. Sabrina straightened. We'll leave, she said suddenly. Elliot turned to her, surprised. What? We'll leave, she repeated, eyes still on me. But this isn't over. No, I said calmly. It isn't. She nodded once, like something had been decided internally. Then she turned and walked out of the kitchen. Elliot lingered. Of course he did. He always did. Mom, he started again, softer now. You didn't have to do it like this. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the boy with the red truck again, the one who didn't want it to feel lonely. Yes, I said quietly. I did. He swallowed. You could have talked to me. I tried, I said. You listened to her. That hit. He didn't deny it. Couldn't. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he said. I know, I replied. That surprised him. But you did it anyway. He nodded slowly, like that truth took effort to accept. What happens now? He asked. I took a breath. This house returns to what it was, I said. Mine. And us? He asked. That was the harder question. Not because I didn't have an answer, because I did. That depends on you, I said. He looked like he wanted to say more, to argue, to fix it. But for once, he didn't know how. So he nodded and left. I stayed in the kitchen for a while after that, not moving, just listening to the sounds of drawers opening, suitcases being pulled out, footsteps moving faster now. Urgent, because suddenly, time mattered to them. By late afternoon, the house felt different again. Not tense, not occupied. Something in between, like it was waiting. I walked into the living room. The furniture was still slightly out of place, the empty spaces still visible, but the movement had stopped, for now. I adjusted one chair, then another. Small things, but deliberate. Because this wasn't about putting everything back the way it was. It was about deciding what stayed and what never would again. And for the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting to what they were doing. I was choosing what came next. By early evening, the house was no longer theirs, not in the way they had imagined. Suitcases stood by the door, 2 of them. One slightly overpacked. Sabrina's, of course, structured even in departure. The other less organized, zipper not fully aligned. Elliot's. I didn't help. I didn't watch closely either. I stayed in the living room, restoring what mattered. One frame back on the shelf. One chair turned slightly toward the window. Not the way it used to be. Not yet. But closer. From the hallway, I heard Sabrina's voice, low, controlled, but sharper than before. "We're not done here," she said. Elliot didn't answer. That told me everything. A few minutes later, they stepped into the living room. Sabrina first. Always. "We're leaving," she said. "I can see that," I replied. She held my gaze, searching again. For hesitation, for regret, for something she could still use. She didn't find it. "You've made this very difficult," she added. "No," I said calmly. "I made it clear." Elliot shifted beside her. "Mom, we'll figure something out. Just give it a little time." "I am," I said. That confused him. "Good." Sabrina picked up her coat. "You think this ends here?" she asked. I looked at her. "No," I said. "I think this is where it finally starts being honest." That landed. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned and walked toward the door. Elliot lingered again. Of course he did. He always needed one more moment than everyone else. "I didn't know about the paperwork," he said quietly. "Not all of it." I believed him. That didn't change anything. "You knew enough," I replied. He nodded. Slowly. Then he reached for the door. For a second, his hand rested there, like he wasn't sure if he was leaving a place or something else. Then he opened it, and they were gone. The door closed behind them with a sound I hadn't heard in years. Not loud. Final. I stood there for a long moment after, not moving, not thinking, just listening to the house. Because something had shifted again. Not tension this time. Space. Real space. I walked back into the living room and sat down in Howard's chair. The one they tried to move first. It creaked slightly under my weight. Familiar. Grounding. On the table beside me lay the photograph from the mill. I picked it up again, looked at the marker. At the man beside it. At the detail they hadn't even noticed when they decided what was trash. And then the phone rang. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "Mabel Whitrow," I said. "Mabel, it's Orson," came the voice on the other end. "I've pulled the records." I straightened slightly. "And?" I asked. There was a pause, the kind that carries weight. "You were right to come in," he said. "That marker wasn't just misplaced." I didn't interrupt. "According to the original county maps," he continued, "that strip of land by the creek, about 15 feet wide, was never legally transferred. It's still tied to your property." 15 feet. Not much. Unless you know what it connects. "The access path," I said. "Yes," Orson replied. "The only direct access from the road to that section." Which meant, "They can't build without it," I finished. "Not legally," he said. Silence. Then, "There's more?" Orson added. Of course there was. "There's a record of a recent inquiry," he said. "Someone requested verification on that exact boundary line, about 3 weeks ago." I didn't ask who. I already knew. "Thank you, Orson," I said. "You'll want to move carefully with this," he added. "But Mabel, whatever they were planning." "I know," I said. And I did. I hung up the phone slowly, set it down, and leaned back in the chair. Because now it wasn't just about my house, and that changed everything. Now look at this moment. They're gone. But the story doesn't end. It sharpens. The truth starts coming out, piece by piece. If you were Mabel, would you confront them immediately or wait and build your case properly? Me? I'd wait. Let them think it's over. That's when people make their biggest mistakes. I didn't call Elliot. Not that night. Not the next morning either. People think silence is passive. It isn't. Silence, used properly, is pressure. It makes the other side move first, reveal more than they intended, fill the space with their own mistakes. And I needed them to make mistakes. By the second day, the house had settled into something new. Not the old rhythm, not yet, but something steadier. I opened the windows, let the cold Vermont air sweep through the rooms, carrying out the faint trace of Sabrina's perfumes and those artificial fig candles she liked so much. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee the old way. Percolator, slow. The way Howard insisted brought out the real flavor. No shortcuts. That morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Calvin Roque. He didn't sound surprised to hear from me. "I was wondering when you'd come in," he said, voice dry as ever. "I need to review everything," I told him. "The house, the will, any documents that tie access or control to my son." "Understood," he replied. "And I assume this isn't theoretical anymore." "No," I said. "It's not." We set a time for that afternoon. The second call was shorter. "Briar Glen Records," came the familiar voice. "Orson," I said. "I need copies. Everything you mentioned." "I've already started preparing them," he said. "You'll want certified prints if this goes where I think it might." "It will," I replied. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. By noon, I was standing in Calvin's office. Same room, same heavy wooden desk, same faint smell of paper and ink that never quite leaves places where decisions are made carefully. He gestured for me to sit. "I take it things have escalated," he said. "They've clarified," I corrected. That earned a small nod. "Walk me through it," he said. I did, not emotionally, not dramatically. Fact by fact. What was said. What was done. What was moved. What was planned. And what I had already undone. Calvin didn't interrupt, just listened, occasionally jotting something down in that precise, angled handwriting of his. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. "You acted in time," he said. "Barely," I replied. "Still counts?" He turned to his files, pulling out a folder I recognized, my name on it, neatly labeled. "The power of attorney revocation is solid," he continued. "Your accounts are secure. As for the house," he tapped the folder. "It's entirely in your name. No shared ownership, no automatic inheritance until your passing." "And after?" I asked. "That depends on what you want," he said. I held his gaze. "I don't want access to be assumed," I said. "Not now, not later." He nodded once. "Then we adjust the structure," he said. "Trust conditions, oversight clauses, limitations on transfer or sale." "Good," I said. He paused, then added, "There's one more thing." Of course there was. If they were planning to leverage the property, especially with outside interest involved, you may want to formally document recent events, not as a complaint, as a record. "A timeline," I said. "Exactly." I thought about the ribbon, the drawer, the contractors, the call. "Yes," I said. "We'll do that." When I left his office, I didn't feel relieved. Relief is temporary. This was something else. Position. By the time I returned home, there was a car in the driveway. Not Elliot's, not Sabrina's. I recognized it immediately. June Arliss. Of course. She was sitting on the porch when I walked up, a basket beside her, covered with a cloth that probably hid something sweet and unnecessary. "You look like someone who just signed something important," she said without greeting. "Something like that," I replied. She studied my face for a moment. "They gone?" "Yes." "Good," she said simply. "No sympathy, no dramatics, just confirmation." We went inside together. She placed the basket on the kitchen table, uncovering a small tin of honey cakes and a jar of something dark. "Blackberry conserve," she said. "Thought you might need something strong." I almost smiled. We sat. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. After a while, she tapped the edge of the table. "So," she said, "what are you going to do when they come back?" I looked at the photograph still resting near the window. At the marker. At the man beside it. At everything they hadn't understood. "They will come back," I said. "Of course they will," June replied. I folded my hands. "Next time," I continued, "they won't be asking." June raised an eyebrow. "And you?" I met her gaze. "Neither will I." Because now it wasn't about stopping them. It was about being ready when they tried again. And this time, I would be. They didn't wait long. 3 days. That's how long it took before Elliot came back. Not with Sabrina this time. Alone. I saw his car pull up just after noon, tires crunching softly against the gravel, like he was trying not to announce himself too loudly. He sat there for a full minute before getting out. Hands on the wheel, head slightly lowered. Thinking. Too late for that. I didn't rush to the door. I let him knock. Once. Twice. A third time. Quieter. Then I opened it. He looked different. Not broken, not defeated. Just aware. "Mom," he said. I didn't step aside. "Yes? Can I come in?" I held his gaze for a moment. Then I moved just enough to let him pass. Not an invitation, a boundary. He stepped into the hallway slowly, like he wasn't sure the house would still recognize him. His eyes moved across the walls, the furniture, the small details that had been put back. Not exactly as before, but intentionally. "You changed things," he said. "I restored them," I replied. We moved into the living room. He didn't sit until I did. "Good. I've been thinking," he started. "I know," I said. That threw him off for a second. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I guess you do." Silence settled between us. Not heavy this time. Just precise. "I didn't know everything," he said finally, "about the paperwork, about the business side." "Sabrina knew," I said. He didn't argue. "No," he admitted. "She did." "And you followed," I added. He swallowed. "I thought it was practical," he said. "I thought, if the house was structured differently, it would be easier for everyone. Less risk." "Risk for who?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "For us." There it was. Not love. Not care. Security. I nodded once. "At least that's honest." He looked up, surprised. "I'm not here to lie anymore," he said. Good, because lies wouldn't survive what came next. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. "I spoke to someone," he said. "A lawyer, just to understand where things stand." "And?" I asked. He hesitated, then handed me the paper. I didn't open it immediately. Didn't need to. I could see enough from the header. A firm name, one I recognized. Vale and Cresswell Legal Division. Of course. I unfolded it slowly. Read. Carefully. Line by line. And there it was. A formal request, not aggressive. Not yet, but clear. A proposal to review property structuring options in light of future development potential. Future development. I looked up at him. "You brought their paper into my house," I said. "It's just information," he replied quickly. "No," I said. "It's intent." He exhaled. "Mom, listen, this doesn't have to turn into a fight. There are options here that benefit everyone." "Everyone," I repeated. He leaned forward slightly. "That land by the creek? Did you know about it?" "So, that's where they were going." "Yes," I said. That stopped him. "You did?" he asked. "I do now." He sat back, processing that. "They told us it might be unclear," he said, "that if it was resolved properly, it could increase the property value significantly." "They," I said. He didn't answer, didn't need to. I folded the paper again and placed it on the table. "They were planning this before they ever moved in," I said. Elliot didn't deny it. "That's why the contractors came," I continued. "That's why the cleaning started. That's why the photographs were trash." His jaw tightened. "I didn't know it went that far," he said. "But you stayed," I replied. Silence. He looked down at his hands. "I came here to fix this," he said quietly. "No," I said. "You came here to negotiate." That landed. Hard. He didn't push back. Couldn't. "Mom," he tried again. "We can still work something out. Something fair." I leaned back slightly, studying him. "Fair," I said. That's an interesting word. It is, he replied. Then let's define it, I said. He looked up. Finally, focused. Fair, I continued, would have been asking before planning, respecting before removing, listening before deciding. He nodded slowly. I know, he said. Do you? I didn't say it out loud. Instead, I reached for the photograph on the table. The mill, the marker, the truth. This, I said, placing it in front of him, is what you almost lost. He looked at it, frowned. I've seen that before, he said. No, I replied. You haven't seen it like this. He leaned closer, and for the first time, he started to understand. Not the value, not the land, the mistake. And that's when I knew. This wasn't over. Not even close. But now, they weren't the only ones holding something important. I didn't speak right away. I let Elliot look at the photograph. Really look at it. At the mill. At the marker. At the man standing where he wasn't supposed to be. I watched the moment it clicked. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough. You're saying, he started, then stopped. This changes things. It already has, I said. He leaned back slowly, running a hand across his face like he was trying to wake up from something he had walked into too late. They told us the boundary was unclear, he said, that it needed to be reviewed. They told you what was convenient, I replied. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was final. Elliot looked at the paper he had brought, then at the photograph, then at me. What are you going to do? He asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Not what I could do, what I would do. I folded my hands in my lap and took a slow breath. I'm going to protect what's mine, I said. He nodded. I figured. I tilted my head slightly. Did you? He gave a small, tired smile. Not at first. No, not at first. I thought this was about the house, he continued. About space. About making things easier. And now? I asked. He looked around the room, at the restored shelves, the chair back where it belonged, the quiet. Now I think it's about respect, he said. That was closer. Not perfect, but closer. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. Cranberry Lane stretched out in front of me, the same as it had for decades. Unimpressed by plans, unmoved by ambition. Your father built this life carefully, I said. Not just the house, everything around it. Piece by piece. Elliot didn't interrupt. He used to say, I continued, that if you rush to own something, you usually don't understand it yet. I turned back to him. You rushed. He didn't argue. I know, he said. Another silence. Shorter this time. Cleaner. I'm not signing anything, I said. Not now, not later. Not under pressure and not for someone else's idea of future value. Elliot nodded again. Okay. And the land, I added, tapping lightly on the photograph, stays exactly where it's always been. Yours, he said. Yes? That part, at least, was clear now. He stood up slowly. So, That's it? He asked. I considered that. No, I said. This is the part where things stop pretending. He let out a breath. Not frustration this time. Acceptance. I'm sorry, he said. Simple. No excuses. No explanations. Just late. I looked at him for a long moment. I know, I said. And I meant it. But knowing doesn't erase anything. It just places it where it belongs. He nodded once more, then turned toward the door. This time, he didn't hesitate. Didn't linger. Didn't look back. The door closed behind him. And that was the end of it. Not loudly, not dramatically, just done. That evening, I made tea. Bergamot again. Sat in Howard's chair and looked through the photographs one more time, not to check what was lost, but to decide what stayed. Some I placed back on the shelves. Some went into a new box, and some, like the one from the mill, I set aside. For the archive, for the record, for something bigger than just me. Because that was the thing I understood now. They thought they were dealing with an old house, an old woman, old memories. What they missed was that some things don't lose value with time. They gain weight, meaning, power. And if you treat them like trash, you don't just lose them. You lose your place in them. I'll say this plainly. Mabel didn't win because she argued better. She won because she stopped playing the role they gave her. Me? I would have done the same. Quiet, precise, and final. If you've ever had someone treat your life like it's disposable, tell me, what would you protect first? And if this story hit you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.